In the program Current Affairs, we bring you a discussion on economic survey. The participants are Paranjoy Guha Thakurta, economist, Dr. Yamini Agarwal, Indian Institute of Finance, and S. Rangabashyam, economic journalist, who initiates and moderates the discussion.
Well, the economic survey is finally out. Lots and lots of numbers, and we are here to try and crunch the numbers and figure out how well and how healthy, how rosy is the economy. Dr. Yamini, let's start off with you. Let's start off with the gross domestic product, GDP. For current fiscal, they have projected it as 8.6% and for next financial year, 9%. How do you see these numbers?
Well, I see that as a more acceptable figure, especially the 8.6% is an acceptable figure given the global recession that has been there and the other difficulties that we have been facing in terms of inflation. I do have my doubts and reservations in terms of the 9% growth which they are projecting, because if we look at situations across the globe, there are different things that are arising. So we would have to look at that number very carefully.
But even 8.6, it's almost close to what we were clocking pre-crisis, isn't it?
Yes, but if we see the situations that have been rising about last 1 year, we should be grateful that it's 8.6%, because situation was that we were even projecting a rate of 7.2%. So that situation we should not be there. And then when they're projecting 9% for next fiscal, we need to be careful on that, because already the Middle East crisis is emerging and we have a crude oil price which is about $120 per barrel, and it's likely to hit on a higher end, which is likely to cause more inflation concerns. Though this economic survey shows that the inflation concerns should come down, but I don't see that coming down with the crude oil being a problem.
And Paranjoy, what would you say as far as the GDP is concerned, especially for the next financial year, where it's been pegged at somewhere between 8.75 to 9.25?
I'd go up to 9.7% in 0, 10 and 11. That's page 1, chapter 1, para 1. So the government is rather bullish about the GDP growth numbers.
Okay.
In my opinion, the emphasis that this government in particular is given on GDP growth is symptomatic of a larger problem, a larger issue. It seems almost dysfunctional or almost schizophrenic in its attitude, because at one level, it's talking about how well India is doing despite the international economic crisis and how our GDP is growing. And almost in the next breath, the same economic survey says, and I quote, "This period of economic stress has severely tested citizens and policymakers alike. Yet, the Indian economy is coming through with resilience and strength. While some clouds linger, such as continued high food inflation and a temporary slowdown in industrial growth, as dynamism in overall growth is evident, even as a series of social protection measures have considerably strengthened the ability to withstand shocks." This kind of a statement, in my opinion, it really tries to escape from certain harsh aspects of the economic reality of India as we see it. One heard Finance Minister Pranab Mukherjee saying that though this is an official document, it is also critical of the government. It's also objective. These are the words he used, unbiased, objective. If you read in between the lines, what is very, very clear is the government seems to be clueless about how to tackle food inflation. It's attributing to the situation prevailing across the world. It's saying we should be thankful that it's much worse in certain other countries. I don't know why we want to compare ourselves with Zimbabwe. Second point is that when you look at this whole issue of inflation and how you're going to tackle it, inflation is almost inevitable. It says India's growth story this year has been remarkable by any standards. And then it goes on to say, here, since growth is in real terms, the average person has had the cushion of more goods and services. Nevertheless, inflation, especially when it's centered on food, can be a cause of considerable distress for the common man and woman. So, not surprisingly, a substantial part, in a sense, I repeat what I said, it seems almost that our economic planners, our decision makers appear almost dysfunctional, because they're saying, we are doing very well in terms of economic growth and GDP growth, but our track record as far as controlling inflation has been pretty pathetic. But therefore the attempt to justify it. Because you're not being able to control inflation, you are trying to justify it. Look at the growth in GDP and factor cost. 0404 prices. Major reason why the economy has quote-unquote bounced back is because agriculture has bounced back. Though agriculture today as a share of GDP is barely 15%, 15.5%, we have a situation where the auto sector is almost equal to the agriculture sector. Problem is the agriculture sector still provides a livelihood to more than half of your population. Now here it says agriculture, forestry and fishing. In 0809, there was negative growth. It shrunk by 0.1%. In 09-010, it grew by 0.4%, negligible growth. So in 010-011, if agriculture is growing by 5.4%, and if you look at the last 3 years, the balance is still agriculture has grown less than 2%. So we've grown well because we are working on a low agriculture base. We've had a series of bad monsoons and bad agricultural output.
Dr. Yamini, Paranjoy here is talking about agriculture, and thankfully, this year we had good monsoon, and we would be bouncing back, to almost 5.5% as far as agriculture is concerned. Don't you think this is probably the right time to consolidate the gains and to build on from here on as far as agriculture is concerned?
When he says that the rebound is largely on agriculture, I kind of disagree with it. If you look at the average value in terms of the agriculture growth, last year since it was negative or a very low 0% growth, and you see it as 5.4%, the average growth is about 2.7%. And next year they're predicting about 3%. So there's not much of a growth you're actually observing. The UPA agenda with the mission and the vision which they had brought about, there was much more growth that was expected. There was much more capacity that was to be introduced. They talk about monsoons, last year had hit drought situation. This year if you look at the monsoon situation, it's not very encouraging. So once we look at the agriculture growth, it's not really pushing the economy too fast. And when you look at the other sectors have contributed, but yes, because of the overall recessionary situation, their growth rates have not been very encouraging either. If you look at the services sector, manufacturing sector, or the industrial output growth sector, they're doing well. But they need the necessary impetus in terms of, let's say, financial packages, in terms of lower interest rates, in terms of more development. So agriculture, industry and services all can contribute, but agriculture has not done too fairly well.
One brief observation on what she said. Point is that agriculture's share of GDP is very low, but agriculture has an impact on the rest of the economy because if farm incomes go up, farmers buy wide range of not just fast-moving consumer goods but consumer durables, which gives a fillip to industrial production. Now what we've seen, and there is a certain amount of worry, that we are seeing a huge amount of volatility in the rate of growth of index of industrial production. That has been an area of some amount of concern. The other point which she made, the area of concern is also high crude oil prices.
But that's a recent development.
If the turmoil in West Asia, in the Middle East continues in the way it is, then if oil prices remain at the level it is at present, say $120 a barrel, that's bad news for India. Why? Because we're importing 80% of our total requirements of crude oil. And that would have, even if you keep diesel prices and kerosene prices and gas prices artificially low, if the other petroleum products go up, it would have an impact. Why? Because even if you keep your kerosene prices and your cooking gas prices and your diesel prices low, it would increase the under recoveries of the public sector oil companies, the oil marketing companies, which in turn would eventually lead to some sort of budgetary subvention to ensure that deficit is within control.
Yeah. Dr. Yamini, the government has always been stressing, even UPA 1 and UPA 2 all the more, to have inclusive growth. And now, as far as agriculture is concerned, there is this issue which is linked with it, investment by the private sector. And when we talk about investment, we go into the issue of FDI, liberalizing FDI norms, especially for the retail sector, where we talk about, cash and carry and all those. What do you think now, in order to give an impetus to the agriculture sector, indirectly, don't you think the FDI norms should be liberalized?
I agree. You can actually have private participation with the FDI norms, but we should not bank on the entire FDI. We have a lot of other participants who can be introduced into the party. Like if you look at the economic survey, they do talk about one of the challenges is where the governments provide for approvals for these private people. Let me take you to this time's railway budget itself. They say that we have received about 85 proposals for the PPP thing. But how many have they really materialized, or how many have they accepted? In terms of acceptance, we bring about a project and we see a lot of difficulties with the ministry. They say that we have a single window system, but how much is it functional? How many of the administrative reforms have really been brought about? Bring about the FDI, open the situation, but are you really ready for the FDI to come in and to accept it? So agriculture sector, yes, a lot of private participation can take place, which should be there, which is actually there because there are a lot of private farmers only that are there. But how much of the technology is being introduced?
And Paranjoy, even in those years when we don't have a problem with production, we have surely a problem with storage and movement of perishables and food grains and all. The private industry comes in there as far as cold chain is a major issue, storage facilities go down.
Rangabasham, there's a lot in this economic survey on some of these issues. But these problems are not new. The issue of wastage of food grain, the issue of developing a cold chain, the issue of better storage of food grain, the country has to engage with on a priority basis. There's no doubt about that. Nobody has any second opinion on that. But when you talk about inclusive growth, let's look at some of these figures that are there in the economic survey itself. Let's look at employment in the organized sector. According to it quotes the figures and it says that employment growth in public sector establishments has actually come down. They're comparing two sets of periods, the 1983 to 94 period to the 94 to 2008 period. And you say it was growing at about 1.5% per annum. It's now down by minus 0.65. If there's been growth, it's because of the private sector employment. But as we know, more than 92% of your employees are not in the organized sector. Then you look at the 66th round of the National Sample Survey, you look at the unemployment figures, they're not really something that we should be particularly proud of, Okay, there might have been a little bit of an improvement, when you look at the period comparison, the comparison figures, we have 99-2000 and 2004-2000. And we look at the current daily status basis, there's been from 7.3, it's gone up to 8.2. Inequality. Look at inequality. Now, are we taking small comfort that according to one set of figures in this Gini coefficient, that's one way of measuring inequality, is better than South Africa, Brazil, Thailand, Turkey, China, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Vietnam, even the USA? The fact is, look, we've had a huge amount of food inflation. It's not high. It's the Prime Minister says that the poor spend 60% of their income on food. Food inflation has been, by everybody's admission...
The FCI and the other state commissions have been bringing about administrative reforms. There's been a lot of debate about that.
A couple of months back, in fact, the Supreme Court had to intervene.
Yes, they had to intervene and they brought these things together. They also tried to curb down on any of the hoardings that were there. But as far as the supply chain bottlenecks are there, things are being taken care of by the government. The government is taking care. What we really need is a good technological push in terms of the agriculture growth. Like when we had introduced the Green Revolution, we had introduced a large number of channels to bring about the agriculture output to grow. We presently see that we are based on the monsoons to a larger extent. Irrigation is a problem. Electricity is a problem. We need to address these challenges besides the supply chain constraints.
What she's saying is unexceptionable. And the point I was making, Rangabasham, is that food inflation has actually widened inequality in this country. That's the point I was making, which is not maybe overtly stated in this economic survey, but tacitly acknowledged, even by if you look at the data that's over there. When you talk about terms of inclusive growth, when you talk about the Human Development Index, we are not doing that well. There is a shining India. There's one section of India which is holding its head high, and we are supposed to be doing very, very well, the billionaires in dollar terms. But when you look at the basic problems, it's all very fine to keep talking about the Aam Aadmi, to keep swearing by the mantra of inclusive growth, but what are you actually doing about it? As she pointed out, irrigation. 60% of your total cropped area still is dependent on monsoons. It's rain-fed, Everybody from the farmer in the field to the finance minister is playing to Lord Indra. And that's what you see, you have bad monsoons and suddenly agricultural growth hardly, it stagnates or there's negligible growth. So in that sense, these structural problems that afflict the Indian economy continue. And unless the government addresses it, and we do expect that Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, when he presents the Union Budget on Monday, the 28th of February, would at least impart some political messages. Because he'll at least make an attempt to talk about what the government is doing for the Aam Aadmi. Ms. Mamta Banerjee has done a bit by not increasing the passenger fares and freight rates.
Let's also talk about the manufacturing sector registering growth of more than 9%. We have seen, how the automobile sector has and how other industries have done. What do you feel as far as manufacturing goes?
The manufacturing sector is doing very well and it has been contributing quite well to the industrial output. But it has been raising a lot of concerns as to the credit that is available to it, especially because the interest rates have been high and they are continuously showing concerns that if they continue to rise, their capacity building progress will actually be lowered down. So I believe the financial packages which the government actually gives. So if that continues, I think the manufacturing sector should do well. And it's not that the manufacturing sector needs a lot of other incentives. But yes, they need to continue with their growth path.
But you spoke about, interest rates moving up. It's kind of a compulsion for the government and also the Reserve Bank of India to, they have to hike the interest rates because on one hand, we are seeing inflation rates at, record
I completely agree. The government cannot go up because it has to control the inflation and interest rates do become a part of it.
There has to be some kind of a sacrifice as far as...
Agreed, but we have differential reference rates. Okay. We also have sector-wise interest rates which are available. We also have identified regions in which interest rates can be given in a manner that can provide the necessary impetus. Let's say if you're building up a technology, then a loan granted for that technological or capacity build-up area that can be given at a lower rate, which does not get translated into inflation directly. So in my opinion, that interest rate part can be taken care of in those areas where it can have a effect on the common man. or where it will affect the credit offtake in areas where there should be no credit offtake, let's say housing sector. You don't need so much of investment in the housing sector.
You mean to say that the government can now, or the time is ripe to withdraw the incentives?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
They should not actually withdraw, because we need the industry to work hard. In my opinion, the incentives should continue because we need a growth. And if they want to achieve 9.7%, they need the industry to go hand in hand with the agriculture. If the agriculture is the laborer class, these are the people who are producing and they're providing the capital. So we need these people together. So we should not take them off as of now.
But let's also look at some of the other aspects.
Can I make a brief comment on the manufacturing sector? It says it's not grown significantly over time in terms of share of GDP. This is what the economic survey is itself pointing out in page 236. Interestingly, it points out that there are problems. He said slow rate of growth of capacity in addition to physical infrastructure sectors. It's constraining industrial sector growth, removal of bottlenecks, etc. That's one point. That's a huge area. Secondly, it points out that in the short to medium term, rising input costs may undermine the competitiveness of some sectors and also dampen domestic and foreign demand. Again, I'm reading out from the economic survey. Another problem it points out is that the small and medium sector is there seems to be, to use the words of the economic survey, a persistent bias when it comes to flow of credit. So that's
you're talking about dampening of foreign demand. Let me bring in this point. Exports have grown, close to 30%, whereas imports have grown by just under 19%. So doesn't that show that, the global demand is moving up, especially maybe because of markets in US, in Europe are looking up?
Dr. Basham, I'm a little less skeptical. I'm a little less optimistic, a little more skeptical. I mean, let me quote what the Prime Minister himself has said, after the last G20 meeting. He says that there is recovery, but the recovery is uneven and the recovery is fragile. I am a little doubtful whether the world economy would revert to the situation that prevailed in 08 and 07 before 2012. Therefore, it's early days for me to be exuberant about what's happening in the world economy. There's been growth. I mean, you have to remember that for the first time in 70 years, world trade actually shrunk. Investment flows actually came down. I mean, it varied, in the case of trade, world trade, the estimates differ from 12 to 15%. In the case of investment flows, it's 15 to 25%. Now, from these low bases, we are seeing an improvement. Of course, we are seeing an improvement. But when are we going to go back to the situation that prevailed before the crisis?
But Dr. Yamini, what would you say that, recession, slowdown, whatever you call it, is long over now? We are on the path to recovery?
See, when we look at the recession, it's not long over. The recessionary effects are still observed in large number of countries. And there are critical dimensions which are being observed in the world, let's say the Middle East. So the overall global situation is not very comforting, in my opinion. Though India is a domestic economy, we also need to recognize that most of our demand actually comes domestically. Though we have a very good export position, which is about 30% growth, which is actually a ratio which we are getting.
And I'm sure you'll recall that period, for continuously for more than a year or maybe 13, 14 months, there was negative growth in exports.
True. So that is what I'm trying to say. We are not really an export-based country. Like when we talk about our development or when we talk about our growth rates, unlike China, we don't completely base our developments on exports. We are based upon a domestic consumption pattern, which is a huge pattern as a matter of fact, and we need to really come out to that level.
And we have been quite proud of our rural demand during the crisis period.
True. And not only rural demand, we also create a lot of social demands, religious demands in terms of festivities, in terms of observing certain social aspects and other things. So we have our own demand which is there, and we need to address those points as well.
Paranjali, let me also highlight this point of savings rate going up to close to 34% and investment rate to close to 37% of the GDP. So that's really heartening for a country like India.
Yes, up to a point we should be happy that we are saving about a third of our GDP. But once again, let me draw your attention to the problems that have been discussed right up front in the very first chapter of the economic survey. It's talked about that the initiatives that are taking place will gather steam, and as I said, there is the waning power of the savings rate as a driver of economic growth. And this is really something that Dr. Kaushik Basu is an eminent economist who's pointing out. He points out that once an economy starts operating close to its full capacity, the savings and investment rates are no longer such effective drivers of GDP growth. Growth would now be driven by issues like skill development and how well we are able to innovate. So this is not me This is the economic survey speaking.
Dr. Yamini, what would you say? Savings rate of close to a third of the GDP. Isn't that very typical about Indian economy?
See, most Asian economies are savers, as a matter of fact, and we don't live on our future earnings.
Yeah.
So, which is a very good thing. But we need to see that we are not only saving, we are actually creating capital for investments. Lately, because the interest rates have gone up, the savings have also gone up. But we need to again see that the consumption is there so that the industry produces. And if that cycle continues with whatever rates we create, that would be good for our economy. So in my opinion, yes, the savings rate is good as long as it actually gets itself converted into investments which are productive in nature, especially for capacity building, especially for infrastructure, especially for those production units which have more gains to offer to us.
And also about the forex reserves position, close to $300 billion. So very comfortable, isn't it?
Yes, it is very comfortable, and that is why the exports, even if they decline when the rupee appreciates, it is not too much of something to worry. And in terms of the overall development, they show a good reflection. So in terms of the forex reserves being good and the exports being doing, we are doing well in the BOP positions. What we also need to worry is that the industrial growth or the manufacturing growth or the agriculture growth in specific, agriculture especially, does well for us. And we need to put more investments in the agriculture side because there are a lot of people associated with it.
And Dr. Yamini spoke about infrastructure sector. Even there's a clear-cut mention, it says accelerated investments needed in infrastructure to address delays, cost overruns and regulatory impediments. Paranjoy, what would you say? Everyone has been talking about infrastructure sector. Some people have even been saying that, it's been oversold now and all such things. As far as infrastructure is concerned, how much is really happening at the ground level?
It's happening at a very, very tardy pace. It's certainly not as expeditious as one could have wanted it to be. As I mentioned a little while ago, there is acknowledgement that the infrastructure sector continues to constrain the overall rate of growth of the economy in general and the growth of the industrial sector in particular. It's all very fine to keep talking about these PPPs, but as Yamini ji just a little while ago said, how well are you able to operationalize it? If you look at the economic survey as a whole, this comes out once a year. It's a voluminous document and we look at it right through the year and consult it as we go on. I mean, the main survey itself runs into 300 tables and charts, and we have 125 pages of tables. What's new about this economic survey? One, a new chapter on services. I think that's quite significant that they've introduced a new chapter on services. Services account for more than 55% of the economy. What's a notable omission? Little or nothing on black money and corruption. Except nice things about how we need to change our attitude, how we need to change our pay our taxes and be nice people and not cheat the exchequer. But I would have also appreciated if there was a bigger section on black money and what the government intends doing to curb the incidence of corruption. I would have appreciated if the economic survey also had that.
But I would like to add a little bit, we have visionaries in the government as of now, let's say the Prime Minister or even Mamata Banerjee, but we are not actually talking about strong administrative reforms. And we are also not talking about infrastructure development. Look at today's rail budget only itself. The rail budget is for the common man, but does it really talk about, let's say, bringing about locomotives which can shift non-renewable sources to renewable sources? Is it actually talking about capacity building which will make us self-reliant? Are we talking about introducing, let's say, a better technology or she says we are going to be connected all across the world. But are we introducing them when we talk about infrastructure development? She says no freight charges to be increased or passenger charges to be increased. Very nice. But do they really help us bring about lowering down the rates that are already available? Look at the telecom sector. We used to pay a very high amount. Because of the competition, we are paying very low on our call rates. Can we actually introduce that kind of a setup in all social goods?
There's need for efficient taxation of goods and services by the new, as we all expect, the new GST to be in place and also the draft tax code. So surely in the next 2 years, these things will be in place and will be taken care of.
If you look at the revenue deficit, this time it is less. So we are expecting these things to actually help. Besides that, they are looking at the administrative problems that are there. When they introduce these reforms, I think they should do well in terms of our revenue positions, especially for the government.
One observation on that, one of the reasons why the deficit figures are looking good is because the government obtained a huge amount of money, about 100,000 crores plus, on account of the auction, the public auction of third generation spectrum as well, broadband wireless access spectrum. Now, these are one-time efforts. That has certainly helped the government hugely in terms of controlling the deficit. Now, you're not going to be able to raise this kind of resources
every other year.
And, this is the same problem with, if you look at disinvestment figures and say, okay, we're going to get a huge amount of money from disinvestments. These are, in a sense, also pointing out some of the structural problems that continue to dog the working of India's economy, yes. Because at one level, here we have one section of India's population who are doing very famously. And for them, India is shining. But for another, the bottom half of this country's population, things are really not at all good. So I think if you look carefully at the economic survey, you'll find all aspects of the Indian society, and if you read in between the lines, despite all the nice things that the government always says about itself, you'll see all the problems, whether it be on issues of financial inclusion or, inclusive growth, and issues pertaining to the healthcare sector, infrastructure, social, physical.
You spoke about the kind of a one-time gain from the telecom sector as far as the 3G money is concerned. And, if we were to talk about, newer avenues of investment coming in, PSU disinvestment for the past couple of years, not much of a focus, and the stock markets were down. Now that there's been some kind of a revival, except
has there been a revival? I'm not too sure.
For this short period of last 1.5-2 months, now that if that revival continues, do you think the government will go ahead and look at PSU disinvestment as a main source of money?
The government will, but the problem is the same issue that one mentioned a little while ago. It's the same story with spectrum. You can do it only once. You can't do it again and again and again. You did very well with the Coal India issue. I mean, you got a lot more than you thought you would. The markets are certainly not in a good shape, all right?
Okay.
I mean, let's keep in mind something that has happened.
But Dr. Yamini, if we were to keep it as
let me finish my argument.
Yeah.
21,000, okay, sensitive index in January. That was the same level at which it was in 2008, January. Where are you today? You've come down. You've come down below 18,000. And with oil prices going the way they are, but I wouldn't be as optimistic as you are, Rangubasham. That's all.
Dr. Yamini, if we were to take this as a short-term thing, and in the medium to long term, the stock markets will move up, don't you think the government will surely take a serious look at PSU disinvestment?
See, you look at this 2010 as an year. This 2010 has not been very good reflection on the governance part, especially when we talk about the scams that have been unearthed. We need to be careful. I am not against the disinvestment idea, but disinvestment does not really bring in the money. It is a one-time idea which is good for the fiscal deficits to go down, but not a very approachable idea. These units are doing very well, and if the government actually generates good amount of a revenue from these units, they can actually put in their own bill. So in my opinion, disinvestment would not lead, but what is necessary is the administrative reforms.
Fine, let's see how the economy pans out and what's in store on Monday, on the 28th of this month, when the Finance Minister presents the Union Budget. Paranjoy and Dr. Yamini, thank you so much for joining us for this discussion.
Thank you very much.
You were listening to a discussion on economic survey. The participants were Paranjoy Guha Thakurta, economist, Dr. Yamini Agarwal, Indian Institute of Finance, and S. Rangabashiam, economic journalist, who initiated and moderated the discussion. It came to you in the program Current Affairs, produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is also available on our website, newsonair.nic.in. You may email your opinion about this program at talksenst@air.org.in.